Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of How I Built It. Finishing out our series on how to build a business, I get to talk to my friend Brad Williams about client relationships. We start at the beginning with finding a client and how hard that's become. We talk about the proposal process and we touch on things like having a discovery phase. It's a very valuable conversation for people who are in the client services field. We'll get into that and more. But first, a word from our sponsors. This season of How I Built It is brought to you by two fantastic sponsors. The first is Liquid Web. If you're running a membership site, an online course, or even a real estate site on WordPress, you've likely already discovered many hosts that have optimized their platforms for a logged out experience, where they cache everything. Sites on their hardware are great for your sales and landing pages, but struggle when your users start logging in. At that point, your site is as slow as if you were on $3 hosting. Liquid Web built their managed WordPress platform optimized for sites that want speed and performance, regardless of whether a customer is logged in or logged out. Trust me on this, I've tried it out and it's fast. Seriously fast. Now, with their single site plan, Liquid Web is a no-brainer for anyone whose site is actually part of their business and not just a site promoting their business. Check out the rest of the features on their platform by visiting them at buildpodcast.net/liquidweb. That's buildpodcast.net/liquidweb. It's also brought to you by Jilt. Jilt is the easiest way to recover abandoned shopping carts on WooCommerce, Easy Digital Downloads, and Shopify. Your e-commerce clients could be leaving literally thousands of dollars on the table, and here's why. 70% of all shopping carts are abandoned prior to checkout. Yes, you heard that right. 70% of shoppers never make it to checkout. And that's why you need to introduce your clients to Jilt. Jilt uses proven recovery tactics to rescue that lost revenue. It's an easy win that lets you boost your client's revenue by as much as 15%, and it only takes 15 minutes of your time to set up. Jilt fully integrates with WooCommerce, EDD, and Shopify, and you can completely customize the recovery emails that Jilt sends to match your client's branding using its powerful drag and drop editor, or by digging into the HTML and CSS. Even better, Jilt's fair pricing means your clients pay only for the customers they actually engage, and you get to earn a cut of that through Jilt's partner program. Whether you have clients that process 1 sale per month or 10,000 sales per month, be the hero and help them supercharge their revenue with Jilt. Check them out at buildpodcast.net/Jilt. That's buildpodcast.net/JILT. And now, on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of How I Built It, the podcast that asks, how did you build that? Today, I have a good friend of mine on the show, Brad Williams of WebDevStudios. Brad, how are you doing today?
Hey buddy, I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, as we record this, we're in the throes of football season, so I'm just okay. I'm sure you're a lot better than me, though.
I'm kind of average. The Raiders are doing...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're
That's right.
I would say they're doing okay. I don't think the Giants are doing okay.
The Giants are not doing okay.
Yeah,
they're being very charitable because they gave the 49ers their first win, which is nice of them.
That was thoughtful.
Right, absolutely. So I forgot that you're a Raiders fan and not an Eagles fan.
Yeah, so the Eagles are doing pretty good, but I'm a Raiders fan in Philly, so you can imagine. So Christmas is going to be fun because the Raiders are coming to Philly.
Oh, nice. Are you going to the game?
I don't know. It's still up in the air. The family's not super excited about it.
Oh, yeah, because it's on Christmas Day.
Because it's Christmas Day, so hopefully we'll see.
Oh, cool. Maybe that'll be a nice Christmas gift. And this is coming out after that game, so we're not dropping any hints for anybody in the meantime. But why don't we get started with why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Sure. So As you said, my name is Brad Williams. I co-founded a company called WebDevStudios about 10 years ago, and we are a WordPress development and design agency, and we specialize in WordPress at scale, WordPress in the enterprise, really building large WordPress-powered websites. WordPress is the only platform we work on, so we're truly experts at it, which is awesome. And we work with some really great clients. So it's been a lot of fun from, starting on a coffee table to growing our business over the years, growing with WordPress and working with some amazing clients and some amazing brands. So
awesome.
That is what we do.
Awesome. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, right? Usually on the show, we talk about a specific product, but this is kind of in the middle of a business strategy series. We're actually going to talk more about pitching a client and forming a new client relationship, right? Which is something that you have quite a bit of experience with.
The pitch, man, like it's, you ever watch Mad Men? Yeah. Like the old ad agencies and they'd pitch in the 60s. Yeah, it's nothing like that. Although that makes it look really cool, right? I guess other than smoking 50 packs of cigarettes a day, but and maybe the day drinking isn't as cool now, but yeah, pretty much the opposite of that. So you can imagine one kind of caveat is we are a 100% remote company distributed. So we're all over the United States. There's 33 of us at the company. So that's, I think it's important to kind of note that just in terms of how we, how clients find us and how we kind of get in front of clients in a pitch or a proposal situation. So we're not just, an agency that's located in Philadelphia with offices here. I'm in Philly, but we're literally all over the United States.
Yeah. And that absolutely does make a big difference, right? Because you can't, you don't have the situation where you can just get in a room with your team and like really hash things out.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely has, I like to say it has a unique set of challenges. All business has different challenges, some same, some different, and across all industries, right? But so being remote is just another challenge. And I think there's definitely some pros and cons to it. I don't think it's better. Well, I shouldn't say that. I do think it's better than kind of the traditional approach. I think there are more pros than cons. And the big reason for us early on was just to find talent. We started out in the Jersey Shore area. If you're not totally familiar, there's not, outside of summer, there's not a ton of people around there. So finding developers or designers that were local that could come into an office was, next to impossible. So we were kind of forced into it, right? So we had to look outside of our area a little bit towards New York, towards Philadelphia, towards Baltimore. And we quickly realized, why worry about the location? Let's worry about the talent. Let's go after the talent. And, from that day forward, we just hired based off the talent, regardless of where you lived. And it's worked very, very well for us. So
nice. And you've definitely compiled a huge team, both current and alums, of very talented people. I've had the good fortune of working with some of them after they were either before or after they left WebDevStudios. So you certainly have been able to find good talent.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it earlier. I feel like, WebDev really grew with WordPress, right? When we first started using WordPress, it was very much a blog platform. It was kind of one option that we looked at against a number of other options in terms of how we should build a website. And, as WordPress matured, so did our company and so did our clients and the size and type of websites that we were building. So once it really became more of a true CMS, we were using it full time for everything. And, the larger companies were starting to look at WordPress as a viable option. And now it's a bit of a no-brainer for most companies that WordPress is a great option. Certainly one they should be looking at. And, it's funny to think back that wasn't always the case. We had the first few years of the company, we had to sell people on WordPress. We had to really sell them on it. And now it's like they find us because they know they want it and they want to work with a company that specializes in it. So
yeah, absolutely. And let's start to really parse that out because, a lot of, at least when I was freelancing, I always thought, man, how do you get like the next big client, or how do you even approach an enterprise, right? So why don't we start with, how do people find you now? Is it basically like through your form, or do you, what do you do to kind of put yourself out there?
So it's a good question, and one that people ask me a lot. How do people find you, right? So the majority of people find us via search, or they've heard of us either via, like a WordCamp speaking or our various contributions to WordPress. We're pretty active with our content strategy, social media. And we get good search traffic because of all those things, right? So we also have some books we've written. Maybe you've heard of them. Professional WordPress is the series that I was a co-author on. Lisa Sabin Wilson, my partner, has been writing all of the WordPress for Dummies books for I don't know, forever. She's done all of them. So if it's got WordPress and Dummies in the title, she wrote it or was a major part of it. So that helps, right? That helps just kind of validate that we know what we're doing, especially earlier on when not as many people knew who we were. So we also get another big stream of kind of referrals from, either existing clients or friends in the industry or just friends in general. People refer people to us. We're a larger, quote unquote, larger company in the space. So people look at us and say, you're large. It's like, well, we're really not. Like in the grand scheme of things, we're a very small company. But in the WordPress world, we are considered a bit on the larger side, being 30 plus people. So, we're I'm friends, our company teams across the board are friends with a number of freelancers and smaller agencies and boutique shops, as Maderos would say, where, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, so a larger client comes in the door and they know this is bigger than what we can do, right? This is bigger than what we can support. Let me send you to a company that, is better suited for this size of a project or the size of an engagement. So we get a number of those referrals. So that is all of that kind of combined is where the majority of our leads come in. Now we have been a little more proactive in the past year or so about more outbound, being more kind of proactive rather than waiting for leads just to walk in the door, be a little more proactive in our marketing strategy and kind of getting out in front of the type of clients we want to be in. It's kind of a new area for us. We haven't had to do that as much in the past, but we're trying to be a little more proactive in that front. So that's kind of a newer area that we're starting to dabble in, but yeah, that kind of sums up how the clients come in the door.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, I feel like the general sentiment right now in the WordPress space, especially, is there's been a lot of success with, I say this all the time, the field of dreams approach, right? If I build it, they will come. I think there's been a lot of success in the WordPress space up until recently, and now I think we're seeing a lot more of people kind of having to put together a marketing strategy and be more outbound, as you say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely been a shift where, it's not as, I like that. I like that analogy, the field of dreams approach. Yeah. I mean, a couple of years ago, we just sit back and the number of leads that would come in the door was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like we just couldn't even spend as much time as we'd even want to on them, or we just had to refer them out because we were too busy responding to others. Like it was crazy. And I think we're a bit naive in assuming, it'll always be like this. And that's not the case, And I think a lot of that comes with the maturity of WordPress. And I think there's a number of factors. And I don't think it's all WordPress. I know it's not all WordPress because I talked to other friends in the tech industry that aren't WordPress at all. And they've seen a downtick, in the past year or so of leads and kind of new engagements and work coming in the door. So I think it's wider than WordPress, but obviously we're in the WordPress space, the WordPress bubble. So that's what we talk about. And that's what we're looking at. So yeah, I think it's opened our eyes. We need to be a little more proactive. We need to try just a few different things. It's not always going to be just everybody walking in the door and, doing these massive projects and, craziness like that. So, and it's also, again, I keep going back to the maturity of the community and WordPress itself. I think it's just inevitable. WordPress has been around for over 12, 13 years now, something like that. It's growing up. And so are all the companies around it, and we're growing up with it. So it's just kind of the nature of the beast, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. We've talked about on the show, development practices have been maturing over the last few years. We talk about automated testing and other things like that have been in other software project spaces before this, but we're finally getting to a place in the WordPress community where that is becoming the normal thing. So when you do have a potential client, right, you have or a potential project, what's the first thing you do? I know bigger companies have RFPs, requests for proposals. Do you go through that process or what's it look like? Let's say a potential client fills out a form on your website. What's your next step?
Yeah. So RFPs are interesting, right? Yeah. And I think there's very, very distinct two sides of thought around RFPs. One is don't ever touch them. Right. They're a waste of time. And the other one is, respond to every single one of them and eventually something will happen. We've kind of gone back and forth on that. My general rule with RFPs is unless it's like an opportunity we just don't want to miss out on, like unless it's some brand that just really stands out, like, oh, we want to work with them. You know what I mean? We generally will not respond unless we have a bit of a inside track, meaning we know someone within the company or someone that can kind of, we have a better sense of we might be in the short running, not to say we're, trying to cheat the system or get around the RFP process, but to say it's more than just an anonymous company responding to, this document that you blasted out to, who knows how many different agencies.
Right,
so
absolutely. And I mean, filling out an RFP, if you do it right, takes a lot of time, right? And
takes a lot of time. Yeah. Because I mean, RFPs are generally very specific. Right. This is our goals. This is our current situation. These are, the areas we expect to be accomplished by these dates. This is how you will respond. This is what we expect. Mm-hmm. And you have 3 days, right. Like it's always, or the date's already passed. It's right. Like, what? So, it's always, and it's crazy because you have to, if you're going to respond to an RFP, you have to follow it to a T. It's the first test.
Right.
Can they listen to instruction? If they ask you for 4 references, don't give them 3, right. Don't give them 5, give them 4.
Exactly 4. Yeah.
It is the first test, right? So you have to follow it to a T, and it is a lengthy process. So you have to know going into an RFP, you're going to spend some time up front. You're going to spend an investment to respond,
right?
If you do it correctly. So generally speaking, we don't respond to RFPs unless it's, again, an awesome brand that we really want to just have our name in the shot, or, we have a little bit more insider information and have maybe a connection or someone within the company that we can work a little bit closer with. So now the majority of the leads we get in the door aren't RFPs. They generally have here's kind of a spec doc, or here's a general overview of what we're looking for. Can you give us a quote? What's it going to cost, right? That's the number one question. What's it going to cost?
Right.
And those are my favorite articles. I think you might have written some of these too. Like, how much does it cost to build a website?
Right. Yeah. Actually, that was popular, I think, because you guys shared that out like one day, and that got a lot of traffic on it. So I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's funny because most of those blog posts, I'm always like, oh, okay, I'll skim it. And I always go to the bottom because it always summarizes with, well, it depends.
Right. Yeah.
It depends, exactly. Right? Like,
which is, spoiler alert, that's how mine ends too.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, it depends. It's just like if you go to any agency, any web development design shop, and you go to how much is it going to cost? Well, it depends. Like they almost will never give you a price.
Right.
And and that's because I always equate it like we're building a house. That's like coming to me as a house builder saying, how much to build a house?
Right. Right.
Well, it depends. What kind of house do you want? How big of a house? How many rooms? Is there a garage? Like there's just a million questions to understand, how much that house is going to build, or how much or going to cost, or how much that website is going to cost. So yeah, the lead comes to the door. The first thing we do is we want to hop on a call and really I like to hear, the first question I always ask is, tell me about your project. Tell me about your goals. I want to hear it from you in your own words. I know the documents and emails probably say that, but I like to hear it from them.
Right.
And you can get a lot from that, right? You can understand not just the specific goals that they've written out on paper, but you can hear a little bit of the emotion behind it. You can understand a little bit more about if they're having some struggles, if it's, our website is just a terrible experience and we can't work on it, and everyone's frustrated and they're all coming to me, and like you can get that, or maybe it's a new initiative and it's a new hire at the company and they're just super excited and engaged. Like you can just sit back and listen and listen to them explain to you what their goals for the project are, what they're looking to accomplish, and then start digging into some of the specifics. And I've always felt like that's a really good way to kind of kick off those conversations. Plus, again, going back to being remote, we're generally not sitting across from a table. We're generally on a phone call. Sometimes we do video, sometimes we don't, but we're just like we are right now. We're talking, right? So I also want to get to know the person a little bit. I want them to get to know me. I want it to be a friendly and fun conversation. Joke around a little bit, start to build a rapport, because at the end of the day, you're both kind of interviewing each other, right? Are they a good fit for you, and are you a good fit for them? Yes, it's great to make money, but do you want to make money at the expense of working with a terrible person,
right,
that is going to like treat you and your team like you're inferior, and I'm paying you and you work for me and you do as I say, and that's that? Like, do you want to and some people might be like, sure. But most of us are probably like, no, we want to work with good people that, we want to partner. We're not just a client, relationship here. We want to be a partner, an extension of the company. So I'd like to try to, look for those things when I'm on that call. and try to figure that out early if there's some concerns here or not.
Hey everybody, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Checkout for WooCommerce. Checkout for WooCommerce replaces your WooCommerce checkout page with a beautiful, responsive, and conversion-optimized design that works with every theme. If you're not optimizing your checkout page, you could be losing 30% of your customers. Checkout for WooCommerce makes it easy to provide your customers with a fantastic checkout experience. You can try Checkout for WooCommerce free for 7 days by going to buildpodcast.net/CWC. That's buildpodcast.net/CWC. Use the promo code BUILT for 10% off your purchase. Nice. That's fantastic. I love that for, a few reasons, right? Because you're not just relying on the words that they sent to you, which are probably more calculated, right? You have their,
Right.
That's the pitch that they practice. But when you ask them on a phone call or a video call, you're getting what's on the top of their mind, right? They're not reading the script that they wrote. So
exactly.
And like you said, it is a relationship. You're interviewing each other. I think that a lot of people tend to take it a little bit too personally if they don't get a job, if they're not hired by a client. I used to take it personally all the time, but
I still do sometimes.
It's tough. Yeah, right.
I don't think you ever get over that completely, right?
Especially if it's someone you really want to work with. But
oh man.
But somewhere along the line it was decided that you guys wouldn't be a good fit, and I try to think it's for the best, even though sometimes it might suck.
Yeah. That's how you have to look at it. It is business at the end of the day, and there's going to be some that just burn you a little more than others. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some you might breathe a sigh of relief. Like, you know what? I'm actually kind of glad we didn't get that, because the more we understood, the more we realized it might not be the best project in the world. So yeah, you kind of got to, brush it off, try to learn what you can from it, if anything, so you can, use that for the next, discussion or pitch and move forward. So yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's sales, right? And, I wouldn't consider myself like, I could never be like a door-to-door salesman. That would be an impossible job for me, right? I couldn't sell cars. I'm not that type of person,
right?
But I'm very passionate and excited about the web and websites. So I'm less trying to hard sell people and more trying to understand their goals and speak to how we can help accomplish those goals. And the direct result is essentially I'm selling, the person on WebDevStudios and our solutions and what we can give to them. And that's kind of how I look at it, because I'm not a salesman. I could never be a salesman, right? Ever. So I just speak to my passions, which indirectly help us bring in sales, So I found a way to make it work, over the years, and it seems to work well. And I think clients, and the people we speak with and our partners really, really respect that, because they, I think most of them anyways, get that. They understand that passion. They hear it and they see it. And really, anytime you can work with someone that is passionate about what they're doing, and I preach this to the team and the people we're interviewing and hiring, anytime you can work with someone that's passionate, it's going to be reflected in their work across the board, because they actually care. It's not just making a quick buck and sending you on your way as quickly and cheaply as possible. Like, they care that the end product is something that they want to be proud of. They want you to be proud of. They want to be successful. And that's how I try to approach it. And that's, how WebDevStudios approaches it, and how we kind of preach internally about, we're partners with our clients. It's not just, a client relationship. We're an extension of their team, and we want them to know that from the start.
Nice. That's absolutely fantastic, because it's a good relationship is definitely the foundation, right, that a good project is built on, along with understanding the project, right? So you have that initial call. It's time for you to build out the proposal. Are you doing other research after the call to see exactly what they need and what they're about and how you would do it? How deep do you get into implementation during the proposal process?
Yeah, and this is a tricky one, right? Because there is a number of different ways to go about this. You could spend a lot of time up front, like really understanding every minute detail of the house you're building, right? Quote unquote house, the website, every little specification up front in the proposal. The challenge with that is the upfront time and investment, right? And, we used to do that. We used to spend 20, 30, 40, 50 hours up front, and realized over time that it wasn't the upfront investment for us was not paying off in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't getting enough clients to justify doing that over and over. So what we did is we found a happy medium of really understanding the project from more of a high level, right? So understanding if it's a fresh rebuild, is there a design phase? Yes. Okay. How many mock-ups do we need to do here? We're going to do 5, and these are the 5 pages, really high level. We're not getting down to specifics of what are in those mock-ups. Now we are talking about features and functionality. If there's any integrations with third-party services, any APIs, any special widgets or modules that we want to discuss so we understand. So from a high level, do you need a calendar? Are you accepting payment? Are there subscriptions? Are you selling products? That type of stuff.
Right.
And then we architect a proposal around that. Again, that high level plan. And we're pretty good about kind of taking those high level overview and putting, real dollars against it based on, level of effort that we know from past experience, from past projects and what that looks like. The goal is we don't want to give the client, it's going to cost you, $10,000 to build your website. And then we get in there and realize, oh, this is actually going to cost you like 20. Mm-hmm. That's a terrible situation and one that you never want to find yourself in.
Right.
Because it's bad for you. It's bad for the client. It sours a relationship. It's just bad. And you make those mistakes early on when you underbid. I think everybody does when they first start. I think my first website was like a couple $100, right? And I'm sure we've all done those, and we look back like, wow, they got a good deal, or maybe not if you look at that code 10, 15 years ago. But
yeah.
So maybe we got a good deal.
I got paid to learn.
Yeah. So we've gotten pretty good about taking our past experience, what we know about projects, what we know about, designs and architecture and development and features and integrations, and putting together numbers around that. At that point, we're looking to kind of solidify that high level plan and get signatures. We're trying to get an agreement in place and say, great, we're going to move forward. The very next thing we do is what's called a detailed discovery phase. And that is that drilling down to the minute detail of the project, line by line. And we put together a proposal plan, which I like to call the blueprint. You see where I'm going with these?
Yeah.
So the blueprint of what we're going to build, which is, the exact specifications of the website. It's all right. If we're enhancing the search, how are we doing that? Are we using Elasticsearch? Are we using Search WP? Are we doing it some other way? Like actually putting together the development plan. And that is something that takes weeks to go through for, a relatively decent sized project. It's a number of weeks, if not longer. And the reason we're able to spend that amount of time is because we have a signed agreement. We have, money to cover that. We have a line item in our proposal that covers that discovery time. So we can sit there with the client over the course of a bunch of phone calls or screen shares or in-person meetings and hash this out. And that approach has worked very well for us. So when we're done with that discovery phase, we have a detailed plan. We go back and forth with the client on revisions, and we get that thing as flawless as we can. And then we have them sign off on it. And that is the build plan. We now have our blueprint, and we're ready to move forward into development.
Nice. And that is the investment for the client is obviously we're going to give you something that at the end of the discovery phase, we deeply understand. So you're not going to get hit with 1.5 or 2 times what we originally quoted you, right?
Exactly. And we make sure, if we quote you a $20,000 project build, we make sure the discussions and decisions within the discovery phase are in line with the budget. So we don't want to say, hey, we could do this, 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 and this. And then we include it and realize, oh yeah, by the way, that's going to cost you an extra $5,000. Right. We want to say, hey, there are other options. However, they would probably be beyond the budget we set. Do you want to discuss those knowing that it will be an increase in cost? We let them make that decision. If they say, great, let's go ahead and talk about it so we know what that cost would look like, and then we'll decide if we want to include that. Okay, so we'll figure it out, put the details around that, and add it as a line item. Hey, if you want this, it's going to cost X. It's over and above what we originally quoted. But we make sure it's part of that conversation. We just want to be as transparent as possible. We don't want to surprise our clients with an unexpected cost, because that will always end badly. So just keep it part of the conversation. Keep that total in your mind. We have X amount for mockups. This is all we have. If you paid for 5 and you need an extra mockup, okay, we can do one. And here's the cost if you want one more mockup, but it's outside of that initial, estimate. So again, that's worked well. So by the time we get done with that discovery phase, 9 times out of 10, we're lined up with the initial cost we gave them, and away we go.
Nice. And so now as you move forward, right? So we've talked about the contact, the initial phone call, the proposal, and then the discovery phase, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
During the build phase, what happens if, because there's a million things that could blow a project's budget, right? Either you misquoted, which it sounds like you do have a safeguard in place for a lot of the times the discovery phase, or maybe it turns out the client doesn't actually know, despite the discovery phase, what they needed. How do you kind of mitigate that? It's like, okay, we're approaching our budget. We're definitely going to go over. How do we properly communicate that to the client without torching the relationship?
Yeah, that never happens, right? Ever.
No, never.
Nothing
Everything's
ever.
always under budget. I mean, that's how.
I know. Yeah. So there's a couple scenarios here. I think one is if something new is introduced, and that never happens, right? So
No.
something comes to light that we didn't know about, or the client, there's some feature that needs to be rebuilt on their old site that was not, a part of discovery. So we have a change order process, basically, where when something like that comes up, we identify it. We have a call and a discussion, basically a little mini discovery. Okay, let's understand what we're looking at here. Let us put together a plan of what it's going to take to execute whatever it is you're requesting, and we'll put together a cost and say, okay, it's essentially a change order. It's a very minor, usually a 1-page, add on to the original contract, and it just says we're going to do all this for you. It's outside the original agreement, but we're going to do all this stuff. It's going to potentially maybe adjust the timeline, maybe if it does affect the timeline. So we have that in there. Timeline's being pushed an extra week, and it's going to cost you X dollars. And if you want to do this, sign here, and we'll get it in the schedule. So that's usually pretty cut and dry as long as it's clearly out of scope. The other scenario, which is a bit trickier, is when you kind of committed to something, and as you dig in, you realize it's more complicated or bigger than you expected, right? Maybe there's some API integration. On the surface, it looked pretty straightforward. You get in there and realize, well, this isn't straightforward at all.
Right.
And it's going to take way more time. That one's tricky because it's, you kind of have to look at each case by case basis, right? So there's no set answer. I mean, generally we'll look at it and say, okay, I always approach it as, all right, what's the impact here? Mm-hmm. Like why are we off? Was it our doing or something unknown? If it's our doing, what is the impact? How off are we? How much extra time do we need? And then you have to make the decision. Is this something we approach the client with, or is this something we just, assume, just eat the time on, basically?
Right.
And it's, it's not black and white. It's every project's different. Every client's different. So you have to kind of take in all the different variables and make your decision on how you want to handle it. But I always gauge it against how well the project's doing, how good, how well we're working with the client, how good the relationship is. If, obviously the nicer the client is, the more our team likes to work with them, the more we want to hook them up,
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there's nothing better than saying, oh, we came across something and it's going to take a little bit extra time, but you know what? You're just such a great client. We want to really help you out here. There's no cost to you. We're going to take care of it. We got it. Now, on the flip side, if the client isn't as nice, then, we're less likely to kind of go that extra mile, right? Because it's like, they're kind of mean to us on phone calls and they're always yelling. And I don't feel like if we want to eat this, you know what I mean? So it's just, you got to kind of, judge it based on what's going on. But it does happen. It always happens. So you just got to kind of assess the situation and make a decision from there.
And I would imagine that decision is probably at least partially influenced by, are we going to continue the relationship with our client, right? I might be more likely to eat the cost of something if I know we're going to continue the relationship, over the next few years or something like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's going to be ongoing, which the majority of our clients are ongoing clients, right? We do our initial project, we roll into kind of a support, maintenance agreement, and we continue to support their website, whether it's updates or backups or, minor development things. Maybe it's full blown, we're rolling out new sections, phase 2, phase 3 type projects. But the majority of the stuff, if you really kind of set that great relationship with your client, why would they want to go anywhere else? They want to continue to, if they already built that rapport with you and your company, why go find some other company to work with? They're going to stick with you. And that's the most important part, is to keep that relationship, as healthy as possible, and to keep that client as healthy as possible, because, a one-off project could turn into, quadruple the amount of overall, money from that client over the course of 2 or 3 years of them doing support, and some random work here and there. So it's super important to keep that, that client retention as much as you can.
Nice, absolutely. And we're coming up on time here. I'm thinking maybe I could steal a few more extra minutes from my Patreon subscribers if you don't mind.
Sure.
But for kind of to put a nice bow on this conversation, we've talked about basically everything except the development phase. So what kind of you've won the job, you've won them over with the discovery, and you're ready to launch. When in that process do you try to hit them with a retainer, or when do you try to secure a continued relationship, right? Because I feel like timing is probably very important there, right?
Yeah, for sure. So our initial proposal has information about ongoing support, post-launch support and maintenance and some options there. We bring it up initially with zero intention of getting a commitment at the beginning. And, sometimes they want it because they need to get everything in the budget all at once. Great. There's the information. Here's the cost. We bring it up initially just so the seed's kind of planted, right? And you're right. Timing is a thing. And over the years, we weren't good at this early on. We were terrible about it. In fact, like we would launch a site and we're on to the next one and we would have no follow-up conversation and then they're gone. Right. So we, years ago, we were like, we got to get better at this. So generally speaking, we start to bring up that conversation around QA. So we'll do our overall development, however many weeks, 4, 6, 8, 16 weeks, whatever. That's full-blown development. Then we go into an internal QA phase. It could last a week or two, maybe longer, depending on the size. And that's where we're doing internal QA, cross-browser testing, functionality testing, load audits, all that performance, all that good stuff internally. Then we hand it off to the client to do their QA. And every client's a little different in how they do QA. Some have QA departments. Some have, one person that's going to poke around. Some don't even look at it, So generally right around the time where we're doing our QA, we approach the subject and say, hey, we're coming up on, your QA period. And after QA is done, we're talking about launching. So we like to start the conversation pre-launch, at least initially. And then we like to try to dedicate a call post-launch with the stakeholders and to really go through the options. Our support is really kind of configurable based on the client needs. So we want to sit down and understand what kind of support they're looking for, how involved or not involved they want us to be ongoing. Some want more support. Some are completely hands off. They want us to do everything, including, minor content changes and little adjustments that they could make, but they don't want to. They want to have a company that does it and they don't have to think about it. To other companies where they have a internal development team we basically hand it off to them and then we're done, and they support it. So we kind of have those conversations and craft that support plan based on their needs. Generally, it's either going to be a week or two pre-launch to start those conversations, but post-launch is where you really get into the meat of it, because the problem is pre-launch, they're focused on pre-launch, right? They're focused on what's coming in the next few weeks. So it's good to kind of, again, plant that seed, but not get too deep into it, and then try to set a call about a week or so post-launch. At least for us, that's how we do it. And then, we go through the options.
Gotcha. And I mean, that makes sense too, right? Because a week post-launch, you're probably coming up on your post-launch, the end of your post-launch support contract or whatever. And now the client really is starting to think about stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a good time to do it. About a week after the dust has settled from the launch, usually. If your launch went smoothly, I would hope so. So it's a good time. The dust settled a little bit. It's like you said, you're starting to wind down the post-launch stuff and start talking about what that ongoing engagement looks like.
Gotcha. That's fantastic. So, well, Brad, thank you so much for your time. I've got one more question that I'm going to combine. It's like two questions I'm going to combine into one.
Okay.
And that is, what's one thing that you want to improve on your process moving forward? And maybe based on that, do you have any trade secrets for us?
All right. Two combined. Trade secrets. One thing I'll hit that one first. One thing I've learned, being remote communication is like critical, right? With the team, and with our clients. It's just that much more important because we're not face to face. We're not in the same room. We're not in the same building. We're not even in the same state mostly. So one thing I've learned is, while communication is definitely key, some things that are often overlooked are having more one-on-one conversations with your team. So about a year ago, I started having one-on-ones with my management team. So my project managers, any directors, as well as our lead developers. And that is anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes where it's just me and them. And we have video and we chat. And it doesn't have to be like a rundown of current projects or active statuses. It can be if that's what's on their mind and they have concerns or whatever, but it doesn't have to be that. It's just time to get some face time. So one-on-one. And when we were smaller and younger, it was a given because I was working with everybody every day. But as we got larger, that wasn't the case. And many times while I'm still talking to, our PMs and our leads, very, very often I'm doing it in group settings. I'm not doing it where it's like a one-on-one where you're going to get much more open and honest conversations. And that's all really, in my mind, really, I think helped the relationship between the executives, myself and Lisa, and our leads and our PMs. I think it's helped the health of the company because we just have better open communication. So it may not be the biggest trade secret, but it's one I learned, I think, a little bit late, is that kind of one-on-one time, even with a smaller team, just having set aside time to interact face to face, just you and that other person, at least once a month is super valuable, and you will learn so much. And that's been great. So that's a bit of a trade secret, and one that I'm sure people do, but if you're not, you should try it because you will learn stuff and it'll be great.
Awesome.
And what was the other question? That was a long answer.
What is one thing that you want to try to improve upon with this process in the future?
Okay. So our process, it probably sounds like it's this flawless. I think it sounds not flawless, but this really, perfected, streamlined, everything is just, rainbows and unicorns. And it's not true. Like, there's always room for improvement. There's always room to make things better. One of the things that we always struggle with is keeping our process documented and current, right? So it's one thing to have a process. It's another thing to have it like documented in a way that you and your entire team can understand it. That's one thing we've struggled with, because we get it documented and then a year goes by and we've made all these adjustments, but we haven't updated any of the documentation because it's like the most thankless job in the world, working on documentation, even documentation to cover your internal processes. But it's so important, not just for our team to make sure we're following every single step, every single time, and staying consistent. It's important for like onboarding when we bring in, new developers and new project managers. We can say, this is our process, read it, learn it, understand it, live it. Because this is what we do on every project. And once it's documented, then you can really, truly make sure that you follow it to a T every single time. Because I'll tell you, every single project that goes off the rails, I can always point to one spot where we did not follow our process. We skipped a step or we didn't do something like we're supposed to. And it hurt us, So it's getting that process that works for you and your team, and getting it written down and then keeping it current. And that's one of my goals, because we have not been good at doing that. So while I feel like I know it very well, we probably all have it in our heads slightly differently. So we got to make sure it's written down and it's agreed upon and everyone's on the same page. So that's definitely a goal we're working towards.
Nice. I dig that. I'm sure I as a developer, and I know a lot of developers listen to the show, they could probably level with that. They really relate to the disdain of doing documentation.
That's the worst.
So awesome. Well, Brad, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, man. This is a lot of fun. Glad to be on the show.
Thanks again to Brad for being on the show. I love talking about this stuff because a good relationship with a client can be worth more than the biggest marketing budget. I think that's something that we've learned over the last 3 weeks. Connect with people, forge relationships. And for those non-football fans out there, or those non-American football fans out there, the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl. Brad went to the parade in Philadelphia. I waited patiently for baseball season to start. Thanks so much again to our sponsors. Make sure to check out Liquid Web for managed WordPress hosting. I use them for all of my important sites. They are that good. They're over at buildpodcast.net/liquid. They'll give you 50% off your first 2 months just for being a listener. If you want to save your clients or yourself money through recovered cart abandonment, check out Jilt. I worked with their customer service and customer support over the last week, and they have been excellent. Just another reason to go with them. They're over at buildpodcast.net/Jilt. And finally, if you want to put the cherry on top of this e-commerce trifecta, there's Checkout for WooCommerce. If Jilt brings the people back who leave, Checkout for WooCommerce is the tool that prevents them from leaving in the first place. I use it and I love it. And you can get 10% off using the code BUILD at buildpodcast.net/CWC. For all of the show notes, head over to howibuilt.it/73. If you like the show, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. It helps people discover us. And if you want to check out the other part of this conversation with Brad, head over to patreon.com/howibuiltit. It's really, really great. That's it for this season mini-series, I guess, on how to build a business. What did you think? Let me know over at jcasabona on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining me. And until next time, get out there and build something.